What's up, guys? 2-0 yesterday. Unfortunately, Kentucky did not get there on the money line, though, in the Gator Bowl, which I think they probably should have done. Kind of ridiculous. Clemson scored, 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter or something like that, and Kentucky wound up having 4 turnovers in the game and still probably should have won the game despite it. And one of the turnovers was, I believe, right at the end to seal the game. But Kentucky was also winning by 5. Again, it became a back and forth game after they blew an 11-point lead, which I believe they had in the third or fourth quarter. They got the lead back multiple times, I think, and then had it 35-30 with almost no time left, with a couple minutes left, and they had chances to stop Clemson on that drive. Didn't do it. Clemson got the touchdown with very little time left, and then Kentucky really just kind of had to heave it almost and threw that final pick that sealed the deal. And luckily, Clemson went down with it and did not try to return it for a pick six and make me really angry. So Kentucky did still get there on the spread play, so that's good. I probably should have wound up playing Missouri. That game I just felt was so difficult to gauge, and this is the new state of college football, man. With the transfer portal, you get these name bowls like the Cotton Bowl that teams should be excited to go to, and you get that trash that we saw last night. I hope nobody saw it, really, because that was just awful. Or there was nothing to see, really. It looked like neither team even wanted to be there. And I'm fine with low-scoring football games. I like the old school, physical, tough defensive football, but that's not what that was. That was just miserable offense. That was just bad football. Missouri did wind up getting there. They looked like the team that wanted to be there more, because Ohio State looked like they didn't even want to be on the field, as far as I could tell. So at least my gauge was right on that, but I should have, I guess, just fired on Missouri once the line had gone back up. But that horseshoe movement that the line did was just bizarre. So I just stayed away. And then I had a nice night with McNeese, with basically, it was a wire-to-wire cover and almost a wire-to-wire outright victory against Michigan as well. They had the outright victory. They were winning by double digits for almost the entire second half as well, and they almost never trailed in the entire game. I think they only trailed right at the beginning of the game, and then that was it. And then they just were off, won the game, and the end of it was just frustrating to watch because Michigan would not stop intentionally fouling, and it's just get it over with, man. Even though I get it, you want to prolong the game. McNeese, their biggest weakness is probably their not very good free throw shooting, although it was fine enough to put the game away last night, so they didn't miss too many of those free throws. So that was good. McNeese, nice play there. I liked that. Move on to today. I have basically one play in each sport. Well, a few of the sports, the non-football sports. We have a huge card here, especially in college basketball. Let's talk about the bowls first. I guess these bowls, man, these are tough to gauge, the bowls today. And the lines have just a lot of the lines have moved way too much, or the movement is just kind of strange and hard to figure out a little bit. The first bowl up is the Peach Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which of course is in Atlanta at the Falcons Stadium there. Ole Miss against Penn State. Ole Miss has 59% of the tickets, but 58% of the cash. And Penn State was sitting around a 4-point favorite almost the entire time the line was out. And now it's up to 6 and going through the 6. So a lot of late movement on game day on Penn State. And it looks like it's reverse line movement, because it looks like Mississippi has the majority of the tickets on them, and even the majority of the cash, even though it's less cash than tickets. So the cash discrepancy and the line movement is on Penn State. I do lean to Penn State in this one, but I would not want to lay 6. I certainly would not lay more than 6. I would not want to lay more than 4 with Penn State in this game, to be honest, because if you're playing Penn State, which I do like the side in Penn State, but you'd be playing them because they have the much better defense. Penn State has a really good defense. So I think that's really going to be the difference maker here. I think people are playing Mississippi because they like teams that score a lot. Ole Miss scored a lot this year, and they're in the SEC. So people are going to look at that and say, yeah, we want Ole Miss here. We want the team that has put up higher point totals. Penn State has had some ugly, lower point totals this year. Yeah, that's because Penn State has a really good defense, and that's what they do. They play good defense. Their defense has kept them in some games against some pretty difficult teams too. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Penn State also, let me look real quick. I think Penn State did play do they play both of the best teams in the Big Ten too? I know they lost to Michigan at home, and it was not an embarrassing loss by any stretch. Let me look here. Penn State. Did they play Ohio State as well? Yeah, they did. They lost to Ohio State by 8 on the road. And then Michigan beat them in their own house by 9, although it was maybe not quite as close as that looks. But those are actually Penn State's only losses on the season. So I don't know if you can really dock them for much, man. Their 2 losses were pretty competitive games, losses to Ohio State and Michigan. I think Penn State is certainly the better team in this game over Ole Miss. It's just a matter of like having to lay a bunch of points with a team that if they're going to win, they're probably going to win it with defense. So that's the way I look at that. And I think maybe there's a little bit of extra motivation there for Penn State because I think James Franklin, I don't know, it seems like there are some murmurs about maybe him getting the axe or something like that because it's like Penn State, like, well, they're not getting over the hump, man. It's like, well, yeah, they have to deal with Ohio State and Michigan. Like, could he do that much better than he's doing right now with the talent that he has there? Like, you can't really out recruit Ohio State and Michigan. And what he did with Penn State this year was get Penn State to that threshold to the point where they're the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, basically. And they're like right there almost on the cusp. And they played both of those teams pretty competitively this year. So I don't know if he could do that much more, but he might have a little bit to prove here. Like, say, just to show like I'm still the guy here. I think maybe one of the knocks on him is that he also isn't that good in bowl games. I'm not even sure, but I don't even know if that's true. I have no idea. Maybe I'm just making shit up at this one. I don't even know, but I think it does seem like there are some rumors that Penn State might be wanting to let go of him, but I think he might have a little bit to prove in this game. And it's him versus Lane Kiffin, I believe is Mississippi's coach in this game. I think I would trust Franklin a little bit more in a game like this. I don't know. I never liked Kiffin, but I never really liked USC anyway. But we saw some of his bowl appearances out there. So I do lean to Penn State in that one. I just think they're the better team, but the line is getting a little bit out of control. In the Music City Bowl, which is the next one up at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is in Nashville, of course. This is what game is this? The Trans Perfect Music City Bowl. It's not the Franklin American Mortgage or whatever Music City Bowl anymore. Whatever it was. Yeah, Trans Perfect. Does not have to do with trans people who are definitely not perfect, but it has to do with I don't know. It's probably some financial company involving transactions of some bank related company. I have no idea what company that is. Auburn and Maryland is this game. And this line we've seen almost kind of do an Ohio State thing where it's kind of like horseshoeing a little bit, but it's not quite that extreme. But what we've seen in this game is that I believe Auburn opened a 2-point favorite. And then it was announced that Maryland's quarterback was not going to be playing in this game. And that is Tua's brother, I believe, is Maryland's quarterback. Tua Tagovailoa. His brother has been Maryland's quarterback, and he, I believe, is not going to play in this game. I don't know if he's entering the draft at this point or if he's transferring, but whatever it is, he's not playing in this game. So then the line shot up to Auburn somewhere around like a 6.5. And since then it's dropped down a little bit to a 4.5 with juice, which is where Auburn's sitting right now. They got 57% of the tickets, but Maryland has 54% of the cash. This is a really difficult one to gauge because if Tagovailoa was going to play in this game, my initial lean was going to be to Maryland here because the public seems like they want to be on Auburn. They saw Auburn basically should have beaten Alabama at the end of the season there. And they know Auburn, they're in the SEC, man. They play the SEC schedule there. They saw them almost beat Alabama and probably should have beaten Alabama, but that was a real step-up game for Auburn. Auburn is not as good as that game made them look. I mean, Auburn was a double-digit underdog in that game. Auburn is good. They are the better of these two teams, especially with Tagovailoa not there, but are they so good that they warrant being like a 4.5, 5-point favorite here? I'm not so sure about that. This is a really tough one to gauge. The market read on this would have me taking the points with Maryland slightly here, but very, very tough one to gauge here. Auburn, yes, they are the SEC team. They are the better team, but are they going to get that excited about the Music City Bowl either? I don't know. The Music City Bowl is pretty close to their home campus. They don't have to go that far to get up to Nashville. So I don't know if that might, because they'll have more of like a home crowd there, if that might pump them up, or if they might not consider it to be that much of a reward because maybe they had higher aspirations this season because they're Auburn. They usually have higher aspirations than getting into the Music City Bowl. So I don't know. Maryland typically kind of winds up in a bowl that's a little bit earlier than this, I would say. So this might be a little bit of a bigger game for Maryland. But then again, like I said, their quarterback is out. So how motivated is the Maryland team there really? I don't know. Very tough one to gauge. Maryland, at least they're not in the Duke's Mayo Bowl anymore. So they're not trying to deal with, our coach might get the Mayo bath if we win this game. And I think, did they win? I think they did win the Mayo Bowl last year, right? So their coach actually got the Mayo bath last year. I forget. And if it's the same guy there, maybe he's feeling lucky that he's not going to get all that Mayo dumped on him this time if they win. So that's the Music City Bowl there. The Orange Bowl. Is it the Orange Bowl? Yeah, the Orange Bowl at 4 p.m. Oh, I guess there are no late games here because the NFL clears the night schedule tonight. So these two games are both at 4 p.m., 4:30 p.m. So the Orange Bowl, which is in Miami, Florida, that's this Georgia-Florida State game. The two teams that people debate whether or not they should have made it the playoff. I think Georgia absolutely certainly should have. Florida State, if they still had Jordan Travis, I think they would be in. I mean, they're undefeated, so they couldn't have really done more than what they already did. Very unfortunate for Florida State, because initially I thought that Georgia was going to be a very disappointed team here because the only reason they're not in the playoff is because they lost the SEC championship to Alabama. That's the only game that they lost, and now they're not even in the playoff, even though I think they know they're one of the top 4 teams. People know that. So I was like, well, Georgia just might be disappointed. They expect to be in the playoffs. They've won 2 championships in a row now. Now they're in the Orange Bowl. That's a disappointed spot for Georgia to be in. But then Florida State, I thought they were going to be angry and have something to prove as like an FU to the committee for not letting them into the playoff anyway, even though they don't have Jordan Travis, because they couldn't have done anything else. They won the ACC. They have not lost a single game this year. So I thought Florida State might want to show up for this and prove something. But unfortunately for Florida State, they have a lot of guys who are just not playing in this game. Now, they've had a lot of guys transfer out, and we've seen this line get so out of control that it's maybe the biggest bowl favorite that I've ever seen on Georgia. I'm not even sure, but Georgia opened 13 back when the lines came out, and now they're up to 21.5 with all these guys not playing for Florida State. Georgia with 87% of the cash and 77% of the tickets. It's just kind of ridiculous, man. Georgia has the cash discrepancy. The line is just so out of control at this point. It's like, I don't know who Florida State's going to even have playing in this game, but a 21.5 point line, there's no way I would lay that on a Georgia team that might also not want to be here. I don't know what to expect in this game at all. We will see what happens in that game, but I guess my slight lean would be to just be taking the points there because it's 3 touchdowns. It's just so many points that it's like, is it really justified for the number to be that out of control? I have no idea. So that game really difficult to gauge, unfortunately, because it looked like maybe initially it was going to be a motivational discrepancy on the side of Florida State, but it turns out that's not going to be the case. And then in the Arizona Bowl tonight, Toledo, Wyoming. Toledo, I believe, opened a 1-point favorite here, but since then it's swung all the way to Wyoming being a 4-point favorite with juice. Wyoming has 75% of the tickets, but only 63% of the cash, it looks like. So I guess at some point the cash discrepancy looks like it's coming back on Toledo. But the reason why the line moves so much is that Toledo's quarterback, Finn, he is not playing in this game. So he is out. And Toledo, I think they're the more disappointed team here, man. Even though, as I've said, I think the MAC teams kind of tend to get a little bit underrated in these bowl games a lot of the times. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Toledo because everybody sees Toledo showing up in a lot of these bowl games. They're always like one of the best teams in the MAC, the class of the MAC. I think they feel like they should have won the MAC this year. They were the best team in the MAC. They got into the MAC title game, and they actually had an easier matchup than they could have, I think, with Miami, Ohio getting into it instead of Ohio, and then Miami, Ohio won the game, I believe. So Toledo wound up not winning the MAC title game, and they were only a one-loss team before that. And for a while, Toledo was like in the rankings. It was looking like they might get like a really like good bowl spot. Like they might get like maybe they were even shooting for like a New Year's Six bowl. Like if we can go like undefeated or maybe even one loss and get into the and win the MAC, like maybe we can get into some like really good bowl. But now they're in the Arizona Bowl, and Finn is not going to be there now for Toledo. I don't know how excited Toledo is going to be for this. Wyoming, they're at least kind of staying in the like mountain time zone area out there, so it's a little bit better of a, I guess, of a spot for them as far as having to adjust to time zones or whatever. I don't know if that really matters in this case, but they're kind of used to playing in this area of the country. And Wyoming was actually in this bowl last year, and they lost to a MAC team. They lost to Ohio. So Wyoming might be a little bit motivated because they know they lost this bowl last year in a similar situation to a MAC team. So they might want to show up for this and maybe atone for that loss. That's really the only thing I could think of there. So I kind of lean to Wyoming in this one, but at the line, with the line being like through the 4 now, I don't think I could do it. Like if you're going to be able to lay like 3 or less with Wyoming or like a good money line price, I might say that maybe that would be the way to go. But I've been looking at taking Wyoming at least straight up in my straight up bowl pools, because it looks like the majority of the pickers on ESPN who don't know anything are picking Toledo there because they're the team with the better record. But not realizing that Toledo's quarterback is out, I guess. But Wyoming actually is not that bad a team. They faced a fairly tough schedule this year too. So no plays on the bowls, but that's the way I look at all those bowls. The NFL real quick is Lions Cowboys. This game continues to be really tough for me to figure out. Cowboys are down from 6 to 5.5, 67% of the cash and the tickets on the Cowboys now. So it looks like the market might be shifting a little bit to be signaling more on the Lions, with maybe even some reverse line movement going against the Cowboys. So I guess they're going to be kind of public here. It's tough, man, because like I said, the Lions, the way they were celebrating winning their division, which is something they don't do often, if at all, win that NFC North division there. Are they going to be ready? Probably they will, I guess, though, because it's a primetime game against the Dallas Cowboys. You're probably not going to lack focus against the Cowboys. Cowboys lost 2 games on the road, but they looked better and probably should have won the game at Miami. So I don't know. Are the Cowboys going to be in an angry mood there? They're still fighting to try to win their division against Philadelphia. Maybe they'll be a little bit more motivated there, but does that mean there's going to be more pressure on them as well? This is a very difficult game to gauge, man. Some people might think, well, they're returning home now, they're better at home, which is true, but that means they're going to bounce back. Excuse me. I don't know. This is a very difficult game. And I know professionals, so I think, are kind of on conflicting sides on this too, who I've seen them liking either side of this game too. So I'm certainly not going to have a play in this NFL game. I don't even know what I'm going to pick in this NFL game. This is a difficult game to figure out. Let's go to the actual plays that I'm going to be on here. And I did talk about the NFL game in my NFL video as well, but I think I'm just reiterating what I already said there. College basketball, I have one play. And there are a couple other games that I think are at least interesting here. Creighton Marquette's one of the biggest games on the schedule. I actually kind of lean to Creighton here, I believe. Let me look at what I was thinking initially. Marquette's up from 3 to 3.5 at home with 81% of the tickets on them, but 77% of the cash. So Marquette is ranked 10, Creighton ranked 22, but Marquette's basically only laying like home court advantage, maybe a little bit more than home court advantage here. So I think it looks too easy to take Marquette as like the higher ranked team. I think Creighton at 22 is actually an underrated team. Marquette probably rated about where they should be, maybe around like the 10th best team. And Marquette's coming off a 30-point win over Georgetown, which, I mean, it's Georgetown. They haven't been relevant for a while, but that's still a blowout win. It makes Marquette look quite good. Creighton is coming off a loss at home to Villanova, but I thought that was a bad spot for them because they were coming off a win over Alabama, which is a pretty big win. Alabama has a lot of losses right now, but Alabama is a very undervalued team right now. I would say underrated team right now because they've faced a really tough schedule so far. Then Creighton lost barely at home to Villanova. I think it means it's kind of a bounce back spot for Creighton here, even though they have to go up to Marquette. I think they're going to be focused. I think Creighton's a little bit undervalued team here, I think these teams are pretty close to even almost, despite what the rankings say. Although the line is kind of telling you, the line is kind of about where it should be. So I'm not actually playing this game, but that's the way I look at that. And it looks too easy to take Marquette. The public is going to be on Marquette, only needing to win by under like 2 field goals, basically. Like, really? Looks too easy to take Marquette. So, like I always say, when it looks too easy, it usually isn't. So, that's just one of the games that I noticed here. One of the other games I was kind of looking at, I think I had 2 other games I was going to mention, Michigan State and Indiana State. There's not much of a situational aspect to this here, although Michigan State does start conference play coming up on January 4th against Penn State. So I don't know if that's a look ahead or not. Penn State, not really one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year, I don't think. But Michigan State, the only problem I have with, I would be looking to fade Michigan State here if I was going to play this. But the only thing that keeps me off it a little bit is I think Michigan State being at 7-5, they're actually a little bit undervalued as well, because they just had a difficult schedule to start the season, man. And I mentioned that when I played them against Baylor, and they wiped out Baylor, and they haven't lost a game since then, but they played a couple of easier games. They did not have a letdown after the Baylor win. They played Oakland, which is like an in-state little brother, and they still played pretty well against Oakland. I think Oakland might have covered the line, though, maybe, or maybe they missed by half point. I don't even know what it was, but Michigan State has been on a roll. They've looked pretty good, but they're running into an Indiana State team who's pretty good and probably one of the better teams in whatever conference they're in, the Missouri Valley. And this line just looks a little suspicious, man. And this is probably the biggest or maybe the second biggest game on Indiana State's schedule, because they did face Alabama, so maybe that was the biggest. But Indiana State, Michigan State just kind of has that thing about it, man, that atmosphere, that air about it, just because of the old rivalry there between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson there. Even though those times are way gone, it just, I don't know, it makes me think about that, I guess, even though I wasn't alive for their college days. I'm not that old, despite the gray beard, but the line just, it looks a little suspicious, man. It looks a little sus with Michigan State being at 8.5. They're actually at 9 right now. 94% of the cash and 67% of the tickets on Indiana State. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is on Indiana State there, which is the way I would lean a little bit. But I don't want to go too into detail with so many of these games, but there's just so many games on the schedule, man. So it being under 10, like, something just looks suspicious about it, and it almost looks too easy to take Michigan State, even though Indiana State has the better record. People know Michigan State is, of course, the better team. They're the Big Ten team. But I think Indiana State's going to be pumped up to play Michigan State there. So, and they're a pretty good team in their lower conference. That's the way I look at that. And then the other game I was looking at that was really close to actually being a play for me is Florida Atlantic at Florida Gulf Coast. And I just don't think I can do it because the line is just a little bit out of control here. But let me see here. Florida Atlantic is sitting at 16.5. I don't even know what KenPom has these games at, by the way. I can look real quick. KenPom has Creighton Marquette at a 4-point game. He's got Michigan State by 9. So kind of right in line where the numbers are. And then he has Florida Atlantic probably by 16 or so. Yeah. So Florida Atlantic, they're coming off a huge win, man, in double overtime, beating Arizona, one of the top teams in the country. That's like a legitimizer type of win for Florida Atlantic. So that's what they're coming off of. They've had time off. Double overtime, though. Huge win. And that was only a week ago. So that's, yeah. And then they had their holiday stuff to do, and then they go over to Florida Gulf Coast, to the other coast of Florida, where they're going to be running into a team that is an in-state little brother. It's not the Florida Gulf Coast of the Dunk City days, but Florida Gulf Coast, man, they're at least an in-state little brother there, and they know they got Florida Atlantic coming in there. Florida Gulf Coast might step it up for this game in a situation like this, and Florida Atlantic has East Carolina up next, which maybe not the biggest name team there, but that is the start of conference play, and that's only in 3 days. So I don't know if that makes it a look ahead as well, because it's the start of conference play. Florida Atlantic riding that high through the holiday, and that was only a week ago. Florida Gulf Coast, I actually might just play Florida Gulf Coast here. Maybe I will. Florida Gulf Coast, Their last game, they played Florida Memorial, who's not even a Division I team, and they only beat them by 3 points. It's like, in that game, Florida Gulf Coast had an okay lead early, but they never really got much separation in that game. So I don't know what was going on there. They came close to losing that game, and they probably know they should have won that game. It actually went into overtime. So is that going to like refocus them because they almost lost to a lesser team at home? I think it might. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to jump on Florida Gulf Coast. So I'm going to be on 2 plays here in college basketball. I can actually take 17 on this. Let's do it. We'll take Florida Gulf Coast at 17 and throw a slight amount on the money line there. I think it's a bad spot for all those reasons I just said for Florida Atlantic coming off such a big win. Florida Gulf Coast might be shocked back into focus. And then the other play that I'm on, got to try to do this quick. God, I am on Hofstra. +9, I believe. And this line has been kind of going down a little bit. So St. John's, even though on pregame it looks like St. John's opened at 8.5. I think some places say they actually opened 10 and dropped down into the 9, 8.5 range. I'm on Hofstra +9. Hofstra does look like they have 58% of the tickets and 53% of the cash now, which I don't like because now it makes it look like the cash discrepancy is on St. John's and that the public is actually on Hofstra, which I don't like. I'm not sure if that's going to change with this game being in like a little bit over an hour, but I think this is a little bit of a weird spot. Ken Baum has St. John's winning this game by 10, but Ken Baum has this game as a home game for St. John's, and it is not. This game is on Long Island, but both of these are Long Island schools, actually. So St. John's, I believe, is in Queens, and Hofstra is a little bit further out on Long Island. I think somewhere, I don't know if they're in Nassau County. I'm not even sure where they are, but this game is like somewhere also on Long Island, and it's not at either team's home arena, I don't believe. St. John's, I don't think they're in a good spot, man. And just like with Florida Gulf Coast, I think that Hofstra is going to have that like little brother aspect to this where they know they're the little brother. In this case, it's a Long Island little brother situation for Hofstra here. They get to play a Big East team in St. John's, a team that's now helmed by Rick Pitino and looks like they're turning it around pretty quickly there. I think Hofstra is going to be pumped up for this game. This is going to be one of the biggest games on their schedule. They get to play St. John's, probably the biggest game on their schedule, getting to play a Big East team like St. John's. Actually, they played Duke, so second biggest game. But this is actually maybe a more winnable game. Like Duke, of course, is a pretty big team. You're probably not going to beat Duke, and they did not. But, excuse me. Oh, my God. I'm like losing my mind here. Just horrible heartburn and shit. St. John's. They're coming off a game where they played at UConn, one of the top teams in the country, the returning champs, UConn, one of the best teams in the Big East, maybe the best team in the Big East, one of the best. St. John's were close battle, close with them the entire time. That was before going into the holidays, but if they've been sitting around on that through the holidays, I'm not sure that that's the best situation. They're still coming off that game against UConn. And up next, they have Big East starting with Butler. Butler has been playing pretty well to start the season here, so that might be a look ahead. I think it's a sandwich for St. John's. They're coming off that really tough game that they just played against UConn. Big game, step-up game. Had the holidays, going through the holidays, and now they get Hofstra before they start Big East play. I think it's a tricky spot for them, man, with a Hofstra team. It's a little brother that's going to be gunning for them. I like Hofstra. I'm on it. +9. Not a good spot for St. John's at all. I don't know why the market is doing what it's doing, but it looks like it's moving around quite a bit, so maybe we'll see it change a little bit before the game tips off, but that's the way I look at those games. Moving into the NBA, there are a couple of games I had my eye on here. The Miami Heat are certainly in a bad spot, but I just am not going to be able to play the Utah Jazz because they're returning home from a road trip. But Miami just they won on Christmas against Philadelphia, and then they did not have any sort of letdown. They went into Golden State and beat Golden State. They've had one day off, and they have to go into elevation into Utah before they go back to California and play both LA teams. So this looks like it's kind of a trap. It's a sandwich spot, really, for Miami, and it looks too easy to take Miami here. With Miami, the Heat only laying 1.5, and they have 83% of the tickets, but 63% of the cash. So it's a sandwich spot for Miami for sure. But the thing about Utah, I don't think I can quite do it because Utah even though it's only a 2-game road trip, it is still a return home from a road trip. And they won at San Antonio, and then they played pretty tough against the New Orleans Pelicans. And they had a nice comeback in that game to come almost all the way back as a pretty big underdog. So that was a tough game for Utah as well. So that just keeps me off of this game a little bit. But Miami's in a really bad spot, a sandwich spot, and it looks way too easy to take Miami, or the line is basically just pick the winner. So I do lean to the Utah Jazz there, but it's not going to be my one play. Toronto and Detroit is just a ridiculous situation where Toronto's down from 5.5 to 5 on the road now with 55% of the tickets on them, but 68% of the cash on Detroit. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is actually on Detroit. This number came out a little bit lower than I expected. I thought it might be around 7 for the Raptors, and it came out 5.5 because the Raptors are on a back-to-back. And what did they do last night? They just took the Celtics basically to the wire. They made a huge comeback. The Celtics were blowing them away, and then somehow Toronto came all the way back. And the Celtics, I think, were refocused coming off almost losing to Detroit. But I think they packed it in a little too early and thought they had the game won and it was over. And Toronto came all the way back and took the lead and almost beat the Celtics. Now after that, is Toronto going to have anything left? And with no time off, Toronto's in a real tough spot. There's no way I would play Toronto here, but Detroit is in almost as bad a spot because they also just almost beat the Celtics, almost to break that historic loss streak that they had, and wound up blowing a huge lead in that game and then still fighting the whole way, taking it into overtime and then finally losing. Both of these teams are just in an awful spot, man. Maybe the way to look at this one would be to take the over if you think both of these teams are gassed, but I don't know if it's going to affect their offensive play. Maybe they won't be shooting as well either. I don't know, but it might make their defense not as intense. And the total is up from 230.5 to 231.5 with 93% of the cash on the over and 75% of the tickets on the over. So maybe I would look to the over in that one. The one other game that I almost was on here was the what game was I almost on here? The Detroit, not the Detroit Pistons. Sorry, that would be crazy if I was on the Pistons. No, the Chicago Bulls. I mean, this looks suspicious. The Bulls are up from 1.5 to 2.5. They have 94% of the cash on them, but 73% of the tickets on the other side on the 76ers. So there's a major cash discrepancy. This is like pros versus Joes, big time. The Joes are going to look at this and say, how could the Bulls be favored against the 76ers, man? But the 76ers are without Joel Embiid, although I think if anybody's actually betting this game, they must know that that's the case, right? But they just think the 76ers are just so much the better team and have such the better record that it doesn't even really matter. They're the better team anyway. Yeah, that is true, but they are without Embiid. So, I mean, that's the one thing that kind of keeps me off of it a little bit is the fact that the injury situation is there. I don't quite want to touch it, but Philadelphia is playing a third game in 4 days. They're actually playing a fourth game in 6, all in different cities, which is a really difficult scheduling spot there. They played on Christmas and lost a tough game to Miami, went into Orlando, blew them out, and then went into Houston yesterday and beat Houston in kind of a tough game, and now they play another road game at Chicago, and they'll be without Embiid again. It's a tough spot to be in, man. And the Chicago Bulls, they just lost pretty badly to the Pacers, so they might be looking to turn it around. Philadelphia has Chicago again up next, though, so I don't think it's a sandwich spot, but that's the spot there. So I do lean to the Bulls in that one, and it looks really way too easy to take the 76ers getting points there. 76ers are in a bad spot, but the question is, has the line over-adjusted a little bit to account for the Embiid injury and how bad of a spot the 76ers are in? Maybe. So the NBA player that I'm on has like kind of a similar market feel to it, but I'm on the Indiana Pacers -3.5. They're up from 3. It looks like it's going through the 3.5. So you probably, if you like them, you should probably get on it before it gets too out of control. They have 65% of the cash on them, but 51% of the tickets on the New York Knicks. The Knicks are in a spot that's close to as bad as the 76ers spot. They also played on Christmas and beat Milwaukee on Christmas. And since then, they haven't won. They lost a tough game at the Thunder, and then they lost another fairly tough game at Orlando where they were down by quite a bit, and they clawed back into the game and kind of got back into it a little bit, and then wound up losing by 9. And they have Minnesota up next, one of the teams with one of the best records in the NBA. Are they going to be out of steam here? They're on a back-to-back, a third game in 4 nights for them as well. And this is a fourth game in 6 as well, all in different cities for the New York Knicks. This is a tough spot for the New York Knicks, man. And it might be a sandwich because they have Minnesota up next. They got Indiana there. And Indiana, yeah, I mean, they won a game. They won their last 2, actually, and they beat Chicago pretty easily, but nobody's really going to care about them beating Chicago. I don't think they beat Houston before that. They are returning home from a 2-game road trip, but whatever. They didn't play on Christmas. They had a Christmas break. They've only played 2 games in the same amount of time that the Knicks have played 3. So Indiana's got a bit more rest. They have a day off here. They get to play the Knicks, even though they have Milwaukee up next. I think they'll be focused on the Knicks. The Pacers don't have a very good record. They can't really afford to be unfocused here. I don't think it's a letdown spot or anything like that, or even though they're returning home from a road trip. Chicago finishing the road trip. It wasn't a very long road trip geographically or time-wise, so they're returning home, but I like it. The Knicks are in a much, much worse spot here. I don't like the spot for the Knicks at all. So I'm on the Pacers -3.5. The other thing I would say about the 76ers, the one other reason I kind of stay off that is the Bulls actually won at Philly not that long ago. And the 76ers had Embiid in that one. So would that cause the 76ers to take the Bulls a little bit seriously and maybe garner some focus there for the game against the Bulls? I don't know. Maybe. They know that the Bulls just came into their house and beat them. I don't know, but that's the one other aspect of that keeps you off of that a little bit. Moving to the NHL. Oh, man, this is so crazy. There's so much going on today. I lean to the Buffalo Sabres, but I don't think I can do it. And the market, it just looks crazy on Buffalo. They're up from -200 to -201. So it's a situation where there's such a heavy money line favorite. I'd probably have to lay like 1.5 goals on the puck line with them. And you take plus money laying the 1.5 goals, but I don't think I can do it. The market doesn't look good for it. Buffalo has 84% of the tickets, but 54% of the cash on them. So the cash discrepancy is on the other side on Columbus. But Columbus just played last night. They're in a bad spot, man. They just played last night and beat Toronto in overtime. That's a huge win for Columbus. Buffalo did not play yesterday, and they are coming off a pretty ugly loss to the Bruins, even though it was the Bruins. So it is a tough game, but Buffalo has rest, and they lost kind of badly to the Bruins. So they are in the better spot, but the market looks like it's in total disagreement with that. Columbus has to be in like a letdown spot, man. And Columbus I believe they just go into Buffalo, and that was the game I was on, where Buffalo was in a letdown spot. Columbus just went into Buffalo and beat them 9-4, and it was like an embarrassing performance for Buffalo. So I think that's going to focus Buffalo in that game as well. So I do like Buffalo in that one, but I just don't want to like duck what the market is doing to that degree. The market looks like it's totally against, and I just don't want to quite lay the price that you have to with Buffalo there. I think the odds makers are kind of taking into account Columbus being on the back-to-back and whatever, so some of that's factored in already, but the spot is really bad for Columbus and pretty good for Buffalo, I would say there. So that's the way I look at that one. And then the other game that I almost wanted to play St. Louis, Pittsburgh. I almost want to be on Pittsburgh here. It is a bad spot for St. Louis, but Pittsburgh, you have to lay a big price, which just kind of keeps you off it a little bit. Pittsburgh at -200, but actually down to -199 now, but 85% of the cash on them and 78% of the tickets. So somehow it looks like they're public, but they have the cash discrepancy on them. It's a bad spot for St. Louis, though. St. Louis, they're coming off a game where they played a tough game against the Avalanche again, I believe. Yeah, last night. So they're on a back-to-back. They just played the Avalanche. I think the back-to-back is skewing this line a bit, man. I think the back-to-back is being factored into this line because they just beat Dallas after the holiday break. Then they played a tough game against Colorado last night. Now they have to play a third game in 4 days and go on the road for a single game against Pittsburgh before they have some time off. And then they have to play Vancouver, Carolina, Florida, the Rangers, Boston, Philadelphia, all bigger games than this, really, with Pittsburgh having the worst record out of any of these teams. So it's a sandwich spot, and it's a weird spot where it's a single road game like this, but it's a back-to-back. But Pittsburgh is also off of a demolition of the New York Islanders a couple days ago, 7-0 coming out of the holiday break. So that keeps you off of it a little bit. The fact that Pittsburgh went into the Islanders' house and just absolutely wrecked them. So I just don't think I can quite do it. That plus the price that you have to lay is, I think, a little bit too high. But I do think it's a terrible spot for St. Louis. So I do like Pittsburgh there. They've had 2 days off since since that Islanders game. So that is factoring into the line already, though. Probably the line is at least factoring in the rest a bit there, but maybe not enough. But and then I also think the LA Kings are kind of in a bad spot too, because they just played Vegas. What was that yesterday as well? They just played Vegas. It was either yesterday or 2 days ago, I guess. Tough game for them too. Losing 3-2 to Vegas, and now they come back home and play the Oilers, who have only played one game out of the break and had an easy game where they beat San Jose. So I think the Kings are in a hangover spot, maybe coming off the Vegas game, but the market maybe doesn't look like it's in agreement with me there. With LA down from minus 125 to minus 114 on the money line, with so it looks like the money line is moving towards Edmonton, so that's in agreement with me. But LA is 59% of the cash, but 52% of the tickets, so they have the cash discrepancy on them, even though the line's moving against it. So I don't know what to think about that, but my slight lean in that one is to Edmonton. I think LA in kind of a hangover spot off that big game against Vegas. The game I'm actually on is the Tampa Bay Lightning, even though it looks like they're down from minus 115 to minus 110 on the money line. I took minus 110. New York Rangers have 71% of the tickets and 61% of the cash. So, of course, they're going to be the public road team here, which they are. And it's like, you're looking at this, you get to take the Rangers as an underdog price here. That just looks way too easy to take the Rangers. I think, again, when it looks too easy, it probably is. And yes, some of the line is factoring in the fact that the Rangers did play last night. That is true. And I believe the Lightning did not. But the New York Rangers, they're in a much, much more difficult spot here. They're playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities since they came out of the holiday break. They beat Washington in a blowout. Then they went to Florida last night, and they lost a tough game to Florida, 4-3. That's a difficult game, man. Rangers, they were in that game the whole time, played a really tough game against Florida, lost right near the end. Now they have to turn around and play right away again against a Tampa Bay team who's been kind of struggling, even though they have Vasilevsky back now. So maybe they're a little bit undervalued, and maybe some of that early season performance is still factoring into the number a little bit. And they got Carolina up next. So will they be looking ahead to that too? I don't know. Maybe. Tampa Bay, yeah, they are also off a tough loss to Florida as well, but they've had time off. They've had 2 days off to kind of break that momentum a little bit there, and they don't have anything upcoming, really. They have Montreal up next, so I think they're going to be purely focused on the Rangers here, whereas the Rangers are coming in having played Florida last night, and that Florida game was the bigger of the games on the Florida trek there. Now they have to play Tampa right away, right after that. It's a tough spot for them, man. Tampa at least has some time off to regather themselves a little bit after that tough loss to Florida, which did break a winning streak for them. But I think with a couple days off, that might help them break that like losing momentum that maybe they would have otherwise if they're not having a couple days off to rest after that Florida game. I think they'll be more prepared for this, more ready for it. It looks suspicious. I'm on Tampa Bay minus 110. So again, all those plays that I have today: college basketball, Hofstra +9, Florida Gulf Coast +17. In the NHL, Tampa Bay Lightning minus 110. And in the NBA, Indiana Pacers minus 3.5. Let's hope we have a good day, man. It's a packed day, and I'm avoiding football entirely, although it's a very short football slate, and I don't like what I'm seeing there. So games are starting in about an hour, man. Let's enjoy everything. Have a good Saturday. Have a good weekend. Let's have a good weekend betting wise as well. Let's enjoy everything that there is to offer here, that life has to offer. Peace out.